Welcome to the AI Film News Podcast with Caleb Jagger and Fred.
Hey everybody, I'm Jagger Waters. I research the AI Film News web show that Curious Refuge drops every Friday. Today I'm joined with Fred Grinstein. Caleb Ward usually joins us. He's not with us this week, but we will be back with you next week with a full AI Film News web show. There's so much to cover since the holiday, but I wanted to start with something that was just had me laughing last night, which was I did my Spotify Wrapped. And I don't know if you've done it yet, Fred, but it is a huge fail this year. There is a Notebook LM generated podcast host like little sequence that you can listen to AI podcast hosts talking about your year in music. That was definitely the highlight because other than that, it was basically this like block graphic. There's just no way it was approved, and anybody who's seen it knows that like there's no way Spotify wanted this to happen. And users were basically speculating that, they fired their Wrapped team last year and there was something like AI related that was planned that clearly didn't work at all.
For people that aren't as much fun, remind me what the Spotify Wrap is, because I think I know what you're referring to, but now I'm confused.
It's your end of year, like, what did you listen to all year? How did your music taste evolve? And honestly, the Notebook LM part was pretty entertaining. I definitely listened and laughed to mine and got some of their little snarky comments and judgments about my music choices all year.
I mean, I always have trouble with these. In general, the moment you become a parent with any of these like fun, clever add-ons, whether it's your recommendation filters or your Spotify playlist, it's not that great because it's mostly like your kids' music that you're stuck listening to. So my algorithm thinks I love Frozen and lots of other things that I don't.
Need to send you something. I need to send you something because there was a video that someone said about that. They were like, a moment of silence for everyone who can't post their Spotify Wrapped because their kids have ruined their algorithm.
I'm with you. I say this as if anybody's listening to me on this topic, but today maybe they're listening to us on other topics. I would think more tech companies need more parents in the room. And it's not for safety and nanny state stuff. I'm just like, think about these products for other uses than just single people that are hanging out by themselves. Because this is not optimized. Like this clever feature of me and my recommendation stinks. So anyway, I know I'm supposed to like cycle out of which user profile. Who does that? Who switches from dad profile to like no, I don't do that.
Yeah. Also, there was a year that my ex and I shared a Spotify account and he was so mad because I totally ruined his music taste with mine. It was pretty funny.
AI will probably solve this. I think that the debate between me and my wife and what Netflix thinks we likes is real, and I'm sure AI will solve that. So
well, I'm curious what was planned. Maybe we'll find out what went wrong. Because it definitely had me scratching my head. And then something else this morning that you told me about was this 12 days of shipments from OpenAI. What was that?
as usual, even our best efforts with this podcast to keep up are stymied. It's also a day of landscaping in my neighborhood, so I hope the audience enjoys listening to that beautiful soundtrack. But yeah, I mean, I think as if OpenAI and Sora don't give us enough to talk about, and we have a whole topic to cover with the leak this week. But it's Shipmas, I think, is what it's being referred to, which means we're doing 12 days of shipping, which here it is, December 5th, I guess, until December 17th, if I'm getting my math right. We are not getting into holiday season just yet. I guess they'll give us a break once it's actual Christmas, but it's going to be cool. I mean, who knows what 12 different things can be. I think today's seems to be a ChatGPT Pro version that I watched a little bit of the demo before I hopped on with you. And they're doing some pretty high end, like, biomed applications with, sort of mapping out proteins or something. But yeah, I mean, it's wild stuff. I mean, are you excited to spend 12 days waiting for Sam Altman to tell you what's under your Christmas tree, or what's going on with you?
Yes, well, I'm gonna have to catch every live stream and sort of see each update that they give us. But it sounds like if this one's medical related, it sounds like this is going to be pretty broad. It's not just going to be focused on the sort of ChatGPT Sora stuff that you and I talk about a lot. It sounds like they're
Yeah,
revealing what else they're capable of.
I think I caught the tail end. O1 in its fully shipped form, I think is meant to be a real paradigm shift, and I think we're entering that in this holiday season.
12 days of shipments. I mean, what could go wrong?
Speaking of which, I think sometimes they can't control their NPR.
Well, that's what I was going to pivot to is, this Sora leaking right before Thanksgiving is a bit of old news, but we didn't get to talk about it at all. And it definitely, that's what you said about PR came to mind for me. It's like OpenAI has had such a interesting year of PR, with Altman's impact on the company, with Sora being this sort of like restricted behind the curtain, limited access experience, which totally changed when this group of artists basically like uploaded a project to Hugging Face that was Sora. And they made this statement claiming that they were, that they felt like they were doing unpaid labor and R&D for OpenAI without compensation. And this was their quote. They wrote, hundreds of artists provide unpaid labor through bug testing, feedback, and experimental work for the program for a 150 billion valued company. While hundreds contribute for free, a select few will be chosen through a competition to have their Sora created films screened. So that kind of shows me that it feels a little bit personal. It feels like maybe there was just some sort of like internal preferences being thrown around. I just sensed a little bit of like creative competition in this statement. So, and also a lot of AI filmmakers are like already using Kling, Haluo, and others without waiting for Sora. So, why do you think the artists took it this far?
I mean, I don't know. I think I'm inclined to do a little bit of a zoom out on as we even approach the end of the year. Like, let's just think about the impact of all this for a minute. Sora dropped way early this year, and for I think most people was sort of the first like, holy crap, this is coming feeling for what video can do with this technology. Those early, the fact that it was like a minute long, there were just so many things that I think were just suddenly, it felt like massive leaps forward. And then it became the biggest coveted access thing. And for what it's worth, and as you just mentioned, this is no longer a singular situation to be in. But for what it's worth, for a moment in time, Sora was the only thing anybody at major agencies in Hollywood would reference. Tyler Perry allegedly famously made massive financial moves on his Atlanta studios because of just something he saw on the internet when he saw a clip. So this was the center stage. And we soon saw how quick other video generation technologies were shipping and getting into the mix. And suddenly that quality level wasn't so special in terms of how beautiful something was capable of being. It's expanded into Chinese competitors with Hailuo and Kling, and lots of suspicions of how loyal anybody's being to these copyright issues. So anyway, it's gotten nuts. So their singular position changed. But what's interesting is, like, I remember Luma being one of the more interesting ones. There's a lot of Luma news this week. They gave everything away. I actually thought that was the most interesting thing, is that the moment that of capability was up and running, the most interesting they did was to flood the internet with people playing with their tool, which is an extreme polar opposite of the Sora choice. So for better or worse, there's two different companies trying to build a product. They're doing it in public, as whether we like their choice or not. And Sora's choice was to, selectively bring in artists that, again, the most cynical take that this leaked narrative is that it's like they're controlling their narrative, or they're spinning things, or that they're sort of leaving people out of things. Like, look, it's a massively capitalized company. They have no problem paying people to do work. I would start off by assuming that might be a choice to not pay artists, and that not a sort of taking money from people that are working hard. Those people are opting in. They don't have to do anything. I would think, I know a lot of people that are in the program that are pretty psyched about being there. And there's even a sense of community.
That's what I was thinking. I thought about, well, OpenAI really took it's vulnerable, and you're taking a chance to give someone early access to something, right? Which is, that's a leap of faith to take. And then for the artists too, like, that's, just having the access alone, it's something that a lot of artists were really excited about, and felt excited to sort of test out.
I'm just saying the sort of the tone of this is, I also can't ever ignore that some people like how suddenly their voice gets really loud because they picked a really noisy punching bag. So I'm not going to question people's motives here, but that this got a lot of press. And I think, look, I think to me, like, I know a lot of people in the program. Uh, I think a lot of people are psyched to be there. I think if we draw analogies, maybe they genuinely are controlling what gets released because they want to inspire people on what's possible. And that's a choice they're making, as opposed to Luma, who got really excited about letting the world have at it. I'm just saying, like, this is like splitting hairs and making noise. I think it fed off the feeling that a lot of people just wanted to have at it because tools like Luma and Kling are so available. And I think it'll be more interesting when it is released. And then we get to do what we normally do, is like, let's do some comparing and contrasting. What does this thing do that this other one can't? Why am I going to pay for this? I'm saying that's the point we all want to get to. And I just think this is a bit of like probably a preamble to the bigger noise that's coming. Maybe it's part of the shipmess season that we're in, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, Luma, like you said, Luma had a few big updates this week, which we could hop to. They partnered with AWS, which is huge, to be a partner, and they also had this
I've heard of them.
Yeah, I've heard of AWS. And they had this tool update, Photon, which is an image generator, which I spent a few days playing around with, and it's unique because Luma coming out with an image generator, it feels backwards because they were a video generator first, so they're moving in this opposite direction. And it also
interesting too, yeah.
It was pretty glitchy. I tested it around, and I guess as an AI filmmaker, the issue that I think folks would have using Luma Photon is that it allows you to seamlessly transition from a generated image into, make it a video. So they're going from image to video generation, but there's no upscaling option in between. And that's, as you know, that's really crucial to getting any sort of high quality generation that you can use. So and we've seen that, Kyber has something like this. Like, there's this big push to be like, oh, we need to allow users to go from they generate an image and then immediately make a video with it. But and we know at Curious Refuge, it's really not that simple. So, without this upscaling or editing tool in between, I don't know how I could really use a feature like that.
I mean, a few things come to mind. On that topic, like, it shows that Luma, as a competitive product, is trying to create their value proposition, like, stay here. You don't have to go to all these other tools, and there's no workflows involved. It also sounds like you're probably not alone on this upscaling observation. And I would like to think that this is why they build in public, and this is why they're doing these creator programs, is because that's probably consistent feedback. And I'd be shocked if they didn't find a way to hear, because they do seem, I don't know, it's interesting because when I think about the Amazon partnership, that is such a beeline to e-commerce. And I don't think Amazon cares about replacing Hollywood or competing with it. I think they make lots of money in the e-commerce business. And that, to think that content is coming in a massive decentralized way to that, is really interesting. But then Luma as a tool does seem to really care about storytelling, and does find a lot of interest in the, what we call the Hollywood of it all. I would like to think that ultimately they care about creators like you, and I think that's going to be feedback they hear. The one thing I'm surprised you didn't first say is, a few weeks ago you were making the fun comment that all these tools kind of look the same. There's this like sort of UX kind of like, I don't know, fatigue or monotony. I'll give them credit. I actually think the mobile app is different to me. I don't know, maybe it's not different enough, but I also love that they're using words like photon and ray, because that means there's a nerd in the crowd talking about like Star Trek guns or something. like is the next one phaser? I just think that they're photon gun, ray guns. I think the UX is interesting to me, and I actually think they're experimenting. Runway is also, there's some cool stuff coming from them too. But I think that's an interesting piece of this too, is that they are trying to talk to consumers in their own unique ways.
Right. Yeah, I'm really excited, especially if we get some kind of editing tool in between. That's really the piece that's missing. Krea did come out with an editing tool this week, but it's beta access only. I don't know anyone who has access right now, but I'd really be interested to check that out, because that's the missing piece for me as a filmmaker. Is I need to modify these generations. I need to change the details, change the color before I go to video generation, or I can't really use it.
I feel like Krea is a sneaky horse in this race. I hear people that I normally listen to for what's next with tooling bring them up pretty consistently lately. That's not me shilling or knowing anything. I'm just noticing.
No, I would say to create and free pick. A lot of artists are using free pick because you can use multiple. You can test out Kling, Runway, Halo, Luma, all within the platform. Which, from a business standpoint, I don't totally understand. How they're all making money. If you can get under one subscription, you get them sort of like umbrellaed. I don't know how that's working, but the AI filmmakers that I know really appreciate it.
I mean, I think we're in a phase that like it's hard to understand the business of these things. I think a lot of people felt this way about streaming TV for many years, which is that it was mostly a negative P&L line and then eventually in the last year or so, all of a sudden Netflix has changed their business model to being profitable. So at my non-business school, but I read enough to try to find patterns. I wonder if we're just in that phase that if you try to make sense of how any of these people are making money, you'll probably be up late. But I think I do think Free Pick, I've gotten to know some people on the team. I think their core business is stock footage or archival or image licensing before they came to AI. So I wonder if this is really an expansion, the way that Getty is interested in these tools too, or at least allegedly. I don't know. FreePic seems to have a different model to answer your question. I think they're starting with a core business before they got into the pure tool generation. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mentioned Runway, and there were a few updates from Runway over the last week or so. They announced this keyframing prototype that was really interesting. I'd love to just give you a little bit of background because I do have a specific question for you about this, Fred. So, for a little background, as we know, editing tools like Premiere Pro, Final Cut Pro, CapCut, they work in a linear manner. You see a timeline at the bottom of your screen and it moves in one direction, like time, right? We're familiar with that. But this keyframing prototype that Runway came out with explores non-linear exploration, as they call it, mentioned in the research. And that's basically showing us what Runway is considering for the future of video editing. This is not a tool that you can use yet, but it's like a research preview. And it basically shows this, it has this striking visual layout. It moves much more like a graph going in all directions, branching off, than just that timeline that you see in editing tools. So the capability is that by generating multiple potential future frames, you can kind of like drag them together and go in different directions. And users can go down these like variable paths when they're editing, literally branching off into like, oh, this could happen, this could happen. And at first that sounded messy to me. And then I started thinking about it and it started to feel really cool. So we're not stuck to the confines of just one linear direction. And as someone with tons of experience in production like you, I'm curious, like, how do you think a non-linear way of editing changes things?
first of all, I love that you said this is just me aging, and it maybe someone listening is as old. Like, so like the first nonlinear editing was when we went from film to digital. that was the first time we called it nonlinear editing. And I only know this because like out of college, I worked at a production facility. I thought I was going to be an editor getting out of college, and I was in rooms where people were still cutting film. There was like talk about like workforce reductions. To post a film, there was literally 4 rooms in an office building. One of them was literally just hanging sound tape, and every time the editor wanted to make a shift, they had to like bring the sound tape, and somebody was up all night. It was pretty amazing stuff. It's very kind of like Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory. And that would, when people introduced Avids into the world, that was when people said this is nonlinear editing because you can move edits around. But it's fascinating. I love that you said this. I'm not trying to history lesson you. I'm saying I love that is so standardized because that's still a line, like you say. It's still a forward moving dimension in time which still feels linear. And I love that so much. And you're totally right. The UX that Runway is like, it's almost like it's 4D editing. Like I'd almost try to make sense of this past history. Like it's creating a spatial relationship with that nonlinear timeline. It's like quantum or something. I don't know. There's something, I love coming up with words for this stuff. But like I saw it, I do think Runway to me in this grand scheme of all these cool companies, I'm fascinated by the culture in their rooms, their product rooms and just their research rooms, because there's a real artist's hand in how they express themselves and try things. And I do think they're trying things. I'm curious if this sticks. I feel like there's been other things Runway has shipped that people are like, I don't know if I'm not, I can't be specific. I don't have an example, but I feel like every time they ship something, there's a real visual experiment happening of like, what if it worked this way? And I love that somebody's doing this. I would love this to suddenly become in every agency's model, that when they're putting up boards on the wall of like imagining a commercial spot, there's this sort of like Alexander Calder mobile, which is what it looks like to me. Like when I look at that amazing picture, it looks like a mobile in a modern art museum. It's beautiful.
I could really see myself using it because I already do a cheated version of it, and I'm not a great editor, but I do other time. I drag stuff into multiple timelines, and it's like, okay, do I like that one? Do I like this one? And it is messy. So I could see myself being able to experiment with something where it's like, okay, if I maybe go in this direction, let me save that over there, and I'm just going to drag it over on this like giant white canvas of as a playground, which a lot of these tools are kind of creating for us. It also, as someone, it's these choose your own adventure experiences really appeal to me as a narrative storyteller. So something like that where we can kind of branch off or do multiple kind of like directions really interests me. So,
but I think like, I mean, you've brought this up on a project that we've been looking at, but without going down that rabbit hole. But there's this thing that is happening. Like, I love how these creative movements start to introduce new phrases, terms. And I remember the first time I saw Luma with the keyframe thing. And I think we give them credit as like they started with the keyframes. I could be wrong about that, especially with the first and last. Do they get credit for being the first tool that did that?
this is a great trivia question.
I think they might, and I'm happy to be fact checked. I'm happy to be fact checked but I feel like that was my first experience with it, and I'm not calling history my experience, but I'm just saying like I think that was the first time I used it.
Yeah, I think Luma was first. You're right. I remember.
I can't remember if Runway was already doing image reference, but it was just this idea of first and last frame that it changed. It added this storytelling instinct that I think is uniquely AI, that you kind of know how something starts and you how something ends, and we all know what it probably does in the middle. Why don't we just let it do that? But then why don't we just let it do that? But let's try it a few times, and maybe a few times it'll do something a little bit different. It's almost like human evolution, that at some point there's a mutation that you end up liking better. Human evolution, all evolution. I just think, to me, this keyframes idea is so interesting to start to apply to other stuff. And we've talked about this in writing, or how do you work with creative teams, that maybe the most interesting to do with creative partners, instead of just giving them a completely minute by minute script, what if this is the way you worked with actors? I think some people do with improv actors. Like, we know where the scene's going to start and we know how the scene's going to end, but let's generate the middle. I don't know. There's something about that. I don't know. Maybe that's just a new idea to me, but I love it.
Well, especially if I can edit, like I was commenting before, if I can edit those keyframes in between, right? If it's like, okay, here's the 5 in between, I like what it did, but I need to make a few changes before going to video generation. So maybe this kind of satisfies exactly the issue that I was talking about.
But I feel like I've heard some animation companies talk about things this way too. That the new, like, I feel like I've heard the Asteria pitch and how they look at they're trying to be the Pixar of the future. I've heard them talk that way. But I think that's kind of the idea. If everybody has to hand draw every frame, well, what if you kind of know what the 20 frames in between are, and you just cut out 20 steps along the way to step 1 and the last step? That seems very logical as a tool for AI. Again, let's not overlook the impact that has on workforces and know that that's a layer there. I'm just talking about the creative process for a second. It's interesting. I don't know. I'm just saying, I'm just looking for these things in this moment of like, how does that thing actually turn exponential, a year from now? And I think my gut is this keyframes idea is really native to AI generation. And we haven't yet fully seen it do everything it can.
I agree. And Runway also released Expand Video. These are the examples where you were seeing a traditional horizontally shot film or video, and then Runway can expand it vertically to basically be compatible with our, the infinite scroll that we do on social media now. I felt that was that's useful if you want to create content and you're like, I don't want to have to shoot it with multiple cameras or twice or different angle. Like it makes that, oh gee, how do I get my great film that I love compatible for something like social media where it would get more views. So pretty useful. It's also beautiful. It's gorgeous.
It's really cool. I mean, it certainly opens up the like where are all the eyeballs, like for people that are listening to things like this and also thinking about the industries, like, you know, it's not even a meme. It's just sort of a fact these days of like how many generational populations don't either own TVs or opt to do that first. And the vertical video is the native setting, and it's interesting because so many of the people we interact with just are instinctively 16:9 folks. You know, as we love projecting ourselves onto the Christopher Nolan verses of what cinema means to so many of us. But the business of what we're all eventually feeding is there's a lot more people watching vertical video, and I love that. I mean, that's been an option in a lot of these tools, but it's interesting that that's like the most obvious. Like, you know, if I'm an agency, if I'm a production company, like I don't have to shoot things multiple ways. It's almost where the audience is in the first place.
And it's also really beautiful. Like these examples are striking. It's really accurate. And I feel like there's actually a level of accuracy that's better in Expand Video than just some of the like generative capabilities that Runway has. It's really intelligent, and I didn't really catch a lot of hallucinations. It felt very seamlessly connected. The lighting, the tone as when the camera would move, it was just really seamless. So that update is just it's very well done. It's very well made. I found it impressive.
It is pretty, and again, I think to Runway's credit, I think there's a design to all their products that is just appealing. You know, there's a real instinct for aesthetic.
Yeah. And there was one final update from Runway, which was this frames feature. Not available yet, but it'll allegedly help with stylistic consistency when generating images. So this is an image generation feature. It's just like image uniformity. Actually, I didn't even include it for us because it was so vague, but I want to mention it.
No, but I remember it. I remember people at first getting excited, and then I don't know, is it basically style transferring and just sort of style consistency? Is that like a seed?
What I hoped for is that we can get better consistency instead of having to either like copy the same prompt or just do a style reference tag. So this was really kind of a tease. We can't use it yet, but I would hope that it helps you establish and lock in a specific look and then reliably generate on something that fits exactly the same aesthetic, which is still a little tricky with all the different image generators. So maybe it'll make it easier.
I'm excited to see it. It looked noisy for a minute, but like you say, we all need to start using it to understand it better.
Yeah, well, Runway's doing their own. It's their own 12 days of shipments, pretty much. So every week, with Runway, there'll always be shipping.
Anybody who thought they're off their devices for the rest of the break is.
There was also this story from last week about the Atlantic discovering over 139,000 films and episodes of TV were used to train AI, but it was not in the way that I thought. And when I dug a little deeper, I discovered that the reveal on this was actually the training data wasn't uploaded screenplays. They didn't manually upload, hey, here are these TV pilots and scripts written. It was actually data from a public website called opensubtitles.org, which means that this the data was really just trained on dialogue only. It was not this complete screenplay that the writers created. Still a terrible thing to discover. The Atlantic included a database where writers could search and see if their work was included. But my question for you on this one is that, like, using transcripts or closed captions of copyrighted content is this huge loophole for AI data training, especially if something is kind of safeguarded and can't be used, but a transcript of it on a public website could be used, even though it's the same information. So,
I think this is a really emotional topic, and I'm almost more curious what you think, Jagger. You're a writer, and I don't know, what do you think? How do you feel reading that?
Well, I do have an emotional response, but I want to save that for the end because I'm curious how this affects an LLM's understanding of story. If it's getting dialogue only,
it's probably really limited. It's probably not actually that useful.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is that like, is this why a lot of the, and in our community, we don't really use LLMs for idea generation or script writing or screenwriting because it's not that good. And in the same amount of time you could get playing with it, you could just work with a human writer who can make something that's going to be great. So I wondered if this is kind of reveals that limitation where sometimes the dialogue is all right in if you're kind of pushing an LLM to deliver that, but stage direction, story, the broader stuff. I don't know. I just think what I see here is a loophole. I see a legal loophole, and that's what concerns me the most.
It's interesting. I mean, again, this is the subject of very well-funded lawsuits on some level. This is in my sort of sensitive opinion, because I know that these things affect real people. I think it is often conflated with the feelings and resentments that are related to things that have nothing to do with AI, in terms of why writers are particularly upset in the last 3 years. They were striking about things that were mostly consequences of other choices made elsewhere. So I can't help but think that way. And I don't think that's a really good answer to this question. But when I read an article like this that gets a lot of press, and The Atlantic, as incredible a source as they are, puts this out there, I want to assume that I'm missing something when I'm not totally getting it right now. I don't know. I don't. I'm probably about to get an angry email, but I'll start with you. You're a writer. What is the difference from finding a script on the web that then gets read, and then I guess the bad thing is that then that company profits from it because they're going to go make money off of this trained model. What is the net difference of entire colleges full of students that are paying often private institutions in the form of universities to study a screenplay and then literally go and say, I learned how to write screenplays, and I'm often referencing it. I might even pay homage to it. I'm just saying, let's just go moral for a second and just like a little bit of like, I don't totally get the difference. And I'm pretty sure most people then use that tool to write an original screenplay that isn't like a duplicate. And so can I just for a second be told why I'm totally, because I want to be wrong about this, because I can tell a lot of people think I'm wrong about that.
Are you saying what's the difference between a human spending 4 years rigorously studying a screenplay to then write their own versus like an LLM using that as training data?
No, I'm saying that the moral outrage that somebody exploited your IP and someone is benefiting from it, and frankly, an institution's making money off of that process of teaching somebody that screenplay.
Honestly, my response to this is tied to, yes, as a creative person, as a writer, but also my experience in the business, pitching, selling, getting optioned, putting your creative work out there as either the complete screenplay or the idea summarized to executives, or a pitch deck of some kind, right? Like, I guess what I see here is tech companies, under the guise of AI, doing what I think studio executives were already doing to writers. And there's already such a big risk. You shop around a project, an idea, and then they don't buy it, and 8 months later there's something eerily similar, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you don't know for sure if the idea that you pitched, if the script that you emailed someone was ever directly or deliberately used or manipulated and turned into something else. But that's an experience. So it's almost a universal experience with writers in this industry, where it's like, this was my project, these were the broad strokes, they didn't buy it, they didn't work with me, but something really similar came out a year later. So I'm that's where I'm meeting you in this conversation.
No, I think I get that. I've been in creative industries where, unscripted is even less protected, by the way. Like if I say, hey, I've got a cool idea for a dating show, and then somebody just tweaks it and says, it's not the same thing. I already had that idea. So I'm very familiar. As a personal person in the idea business, which, I don't put the effort of writing a full screenplay. I get that's a fully different thing than me throwing together a deck for an idea. So I'm not comparing, but I'm saying I've gotten used to it a long time ago that I need to have 100 ideas, and I need, and my privilege to get paid to be a creative person is because I'm abundant, and I'm just going to have to deal with the fact that there's also a lot of other creative people staring at the same newspapers and reacting to the same zeitgeist, and sadly making my special feelings of my ideas not that original. So I'm just saying, like, I've had to reckon with part of what you said. I'm not taking it away. I'm saying that's real. I get it, and we all cope with that and react to it and feel about it. I'm not. I'm more just like, this particular article seems to point to a corporate overreach, a somebody is stealing from you, and again, I don't know. I think this is the thing that I'm not legally prepared to have anything resembling a smart opinion. I'm just trying to make sense of the practical. What are you actually upset about? I think you're upset that you're not working the way you used to. I think that's an industrial downturn. I think that industrial downturn is mostly what happens in cycles for businesses in healthy states and in the very unhealthy states that the industry has self-inflicted to itself, at least in the last 5 years. So I don't know. I think these things get conflated. I just think they get, I guess part of me just, I think that's a noisy article that's interesting. It's an interesting idea that here's this loophole, like you say. I think that is interesting. And I think all the people that are spending lots of money on attorneys should pay attention to more of these loopholes, because if they want to win their cases, they got to win this stuff too. I'm just trying to understand, what do you really do with this? Like, I don't know. I really don't want to offend anybody. Writers, I really think, should win when everything's over. And I actually think in the end, a lot of these tools make writers better. So I'm very sensitive to sound like a jerk here, but I'm also trying to find the practical, what are we getting out of that? I don't know.
I'm totally with you on that. And that's how I feel about the anger as well. And even last year during the strike, when I was kind of turning my sails in this direction of AI, I was like, what, we're angry because things aren't working in a general sense. And then something comes along and it seems like this is the whole problem. And it's like, there's 12 problems. And this is just one of them. And also, as a person, I think I'm more offended, like the human to human, like overt, deliberate stealing of ideas that this industry is no stranger to, particularly from Hollywood. Doesn't have a beautiful, perfect, history tied up in a bow. It's really messy. A lot of things have been stolen. And I'm a little bit more, I feel more betrayed by human executives deliberately taking a story from a writer than I do with, it's like, well, this is a machine that has a lot of information to work with. Almost because it's not a person, I don't feel as much blame even for the people behind it, right? And I'm saying that maybe controversially the way that you are too. So I agree with you.
I think we're both searching for how to talk about this, and I'm very sensitive to this topic, but I'm also I'm trying to be curious about other ways to look at this stuff besides getting upset, because I do think there's a practical gravity and floor underneath the outcomes on here. Like, we're about to spend a minute probably talking about the Amazon technology, and there's new tools that can just watch videos. Forget like stealing closed captions of dialogues. Like, they're just going to watch the entire thing. And yeah, it's all on the internet. It's all there. And if in all those, all media and like, think about the contracts that we've been signing, working in our businesses, that the end of most agreements that most of us sign, all media forever on any planet in any solar system in perpetuity, that stuff's being given away. Like, and most of us sign those things. Most of us don't think about what this new media is or what this different type of time scale is. So I'm just saying, like, in that type of universe that now the thing emerged, what are we supposed to do? And are we literally just trying to put, like, there's a boat with water coming up? Are we trying to put corks in it? Or are we just trying to build a different boat and sail in a different ocean? I don't know.
I agree. And when you get big, when you really zoom out, I guess when I start to get big picture with it, I think of my entire digital footprint, everything that I've ever done online, my identity, my sense of personhood that is now this like publicly available data ? And this is an issue that I remember thinking about as a teenager, growing up with the internet. Like, it was a part of my childhood. It was as a kid. And I was like, we've never acknowledged, I mean, not just legislatively, but we're not acknowledging this. We're not getting ahead of the inconceivable possibilities of what the internet implies. And then now we're getting like super philosophical, right? But what this, I guess, where I land when I start thinking deeply about a story like this one is, so much of me is out there digitally. So much of all of us is, and not just our creative ideas, but our personhoods. It just makes me think, like, what is free to use, which is kind of, this is the center of the whole AI debate, right?
It's really interesting, and our listeners probably want us to go back to news, but I think just to try to, I'm not trying to end this. I'm just trying to come up with what do we do with this stuff. I think it's interesting. I think clearly there's more stones to unturn for things that haven't been thought through on how something that was maybe innocently on the internet for opensubtitles.org is now suddenly a major piece of news on a major news site. It's interesting. It's. I think this is where, if you're not unsettled by some of this technology, you're not paying attention. If it doesn't inspire you to interrogate it and think about what things have we not thought through, then that's what maybe we're doing a little bit of here. And again, I'm humbly stating that if I sound like I don't think about why people are offended by this stuff, I do. I just then try to think the other side of, like, well, then what do you do next? And is it possible that actually there's a sober reality we have to settle in on? Or is there even like a, wait, okay, I know I don't like that, but I do sense that when I lean into what else can I do, I tend to find stuff that gets me moving in a different direction. And I think that's true of a lot of the trends in the AI creative space, is that the things that at first don't fit in an old model seem to be pointing to a different model that might be more interesting, might be more lucrative, might be more profit. And those all things might be. I don't know. I'm just thinking optimistically.
I'm with you. And yeah, you teased the Amazon updates that we're going to share to walk people through it. Amazon had some major announcements at the reInvent 2024 conference, including this whole new generation of really intelligent foundational models. And I can describe them a little bit before we talk about it. So apparently that they'll have the ability to process text, image, video as prompts, and then customers can use this Amazon Nova powered generative AI applications to understand videos, charts, and documents, and then generate videos using that. So this is really kind of like a climactic moment where these models are reaching a level of like video understanding and analysis, right? There's an example I shared with you. This example I shared with you about it's just a 12-second clip of a play happening in a football game, but really accurately, AI is able to just describe all of the play, everything that occurred in the video very well. So, but Amazon is a step beyond that. They're not just releasing that; they're releasing this whole sort of network of AI applications that will be able to like analyze things, summarize what happened, and then maybe like write an article about it, and then keep iterating on what it observed. So what's the change to specifically marketing and content creation that you see coming out of applications like this?
E-commerce and business. I think I remember many years ago when I was I think still at A&E, we were having an offsite, and this was pre-streaming, pre the FANG corporations back then, Facebook, before they became Meta, when they were part of that acronym. And I remember like our like offsite person who was there to inspire us or whatever was just dropping data and TED talking his way through whatever. And I remember at some point he came to Amazon, and by that back then, that's when most of us used it to buy diapers or buy cheap shipping or whatever. But then it just dawned on the whole room, like consumer data. I mean, obviously we live in a world of data as being part of every sentence these days, but back then it wasn't like that. But I mean, just that observation of like, oh my God, the amount of information that organization has been just organically gathering and how valuable it is, how useful it is. So that to me has always been I'm so humbled by Jeff Bezos and what that company is and how practically valuable it is to so many people. And to think that that has been the sort of core thesis of some kind around their application of AI. They're building generate video models. They're building foundational models. I don't speak in hyperbole because it's fun. I'm just saying I take them very seriously as like core to not experimental human behaviors. These are things that we're about to pump a lot of money through them through the holidays and shipping. Like it's a massive footprint of impact that they have. Like when they got into advertising, that was a big moment on their media when they were starting to suddenly do the TV commercials. That was a giant moment because of the amount of people that just have Prime subscriptions. So it's hard. As much noise occupies this space, it's hard not to think they don't even need to make noise. They're just roaring, but as a core product. And I take it very seriously. I don't know if it totally affects the cinematic stuff that we tend to get excited about. I think it more interestingly shows that this type of technology, it's not even just tentacles, has like instant applications in massive spaces like this. And one thing that I think was implicit to what he said, our good friend Don Allen, our friend of the homies, he said it to me once in a meeting that there's text to video, there's image to video, there's all these dink to dink, there's all these acronyms. His thing was anything to anything. Like, let's start imagining a world where anything input can be anything output, and that's what I see here. I see a very robust application of that.
Perfectly said. Because that's what when I look at all of it, it's like, oh, ChatGPT, but like infinite. And that sounds broad, but anything to anything, meaning I upload a picture and I say, I want you to create this kind of content about it. And not only does it generate like a detailed text response, it's like, no, here are the assets, here's the entire like launch plan for what this kernel of an idea is. And I think of my friends who work in social media and marketing in that sector grew so much over the last 12 years. And I think of my human friends who are, have these right now secure roles working in social media, doing this by hand. And if that is about to be automated, even to a degree that's a little bit better, then those jobs I think would be in trouble. So that definitely occurs to me too.
I hope this isn't too roundabout, but in one of our group chats, the people are always talking about the news, on WhatsApp and what, somebody made the comment about how, small businesses, and to bring it back to this, even like what a shot in the arm their access to commercials and ads is suddenly, in terms of their ability, when you look at like, some of the interesting ads. I know the Coca-Cola one's polarizing, but there's some other ones that have been launched recently. That they're suddenly available to, not national or international corporations with giant budgets. So like suddenly that access point, that democratization thing is interesting. Somebody then paralleled that to music videos. Like now any artist has an ability to sort of talk to their community, talk to new fans, talk to who they are while they're on stage and project it behind them, in ways that used to feel unattainable. I think about the way I think agencies work that, put together advertising campaigns. Like they might start, an internal pitch process by just throwing up mood board things on the walls, like random objects. Like they might take types of wood or leaves or things, an Ansel Adams photograph and put it on the wall and say, how do we apply this to Jaguar? Like they'll do that as humans. And to think that you could, whether it's these tools or this type of thinking, like I can take like an Ansel Adams black and white photograph of Yosemite and saying, can you make that a car commercial? And it'll do something. Like it'll do something that gets me going of like, wait, I'm just giving you inspiration that you're going to turn into sort of word or interpretive data that helps me express something. And that to me is probably not even the fully fleshed out idea of what anything to anything means. But I think that's where this starts to get like, let's see where this goes. Yeah. So.
It's the speed, this sort of like instant, like no lead time. That's the part that we're up against here. I think that when we talk about like, oh, but like human creativity should be valued, like having teams of creatives working on campaigns is better. And I love what those human teams create, but they can't do it in 30 seconds. You go away, you come up with, you come up with 5 campaigns that takes 2 weeks. And then in that 2-week time period, this could have just been moving faster. And I think it's just, it's revealing that the human versus AI employment thing is speed right now.
That's real. But I guess the part where I'm trying to be optimistic is like, I think about my neighborhood and there's this awesome, like, sort of Whole Foods kind of competitor. It's like a one-off, I think, called Rainbow Acres. It's like, happy little, very organic little supermarket. Like, I think to them, like they have such a clear brand and they have such a vibe and a culture. They everybody that works there seems to be a part of something. Like, what if they started creating really cool content And what if they would have never thought about doing that? Because it just like, who has a budget to do things like that? So where the 10-person teams at the major agency are the first thought, and that's not real. I get it. And that's a one impact that's, sort of frustrating to fully think through. How does maybe those people suddenly find opportunities to work for different types of clients? Or how do they, smaller teams, do more things for more people?
It's like that thing I like to say about filmmaking, where I don't care how Disney can save millions of dollars on a production using AI. I care about the person who can make a feature film for $5,000 now. I care about that. So this is this update for small businesses can maybe, uplift in the same way. I also like, just to shout out the different models real quick. There's 6 different models, 6 different models that do different things. Nova Micro, a text-only model that delivers the lowest latency responses at very low cost. Nova Lite, a low-cost multimodal model that's lightning fast for processing image, video, and text. And Nova Pro, a highly capable multimodal model with the best combination of accuracy, speed, and cost for a wide range of tasks. Very vague. Interested to see what comes of that. Nova Premier, the most capable of Amazon's multimodal models for complex reasoning tasks and for use as the best teacher for distilling custom models. Interesting.
Yeah, all that reads B2B to me. That's a business. That's a business to business conversation. None of those were like the distilled beauty of a runway announcement of, here's that one thing that can now get you to lip sync.
Well, the last 2, Nova Canvas, a state-of-the-art image generation model, and Nova Reel, a state-of-the-art video generation model. Interesting to see what those are capable of on their own, but more interested to see them plugged into the previous 4, these B2B updates. So the monster emerges.
The monster emerges. I mean, I think when we start to seeing these amazing commercials getting made, sometimes by friends of ours, that sort of, this was part of their own kind of fairy tale journey from a bedroom filmmaker to now being like, people like Dave Clark are sort of ascendant. I think I'm also sensing this trend out there that there's a lot of agencies or a lot of creative orgs that maybe had been sitting things out, maybe rightfully didn't think things were ready. Maybe were hyper intimidated by the comfy UIs and a lot of these more very complex workflows. For whoever just in November or December of this year suddenly just said, like, what, as a company, we should pay attention to this stuff. Like, they just got a very interesting press release to read. And they have the opportunity to possibly ignore a lot of very beautiful things that have been innovated and worked with among people that we like to create with. That's a very thoughtful, business opportunity for somebody that might want to take their business. I'm going to guess there's loads of, a text in those fine print about copyright and indemnification and insurance. And I'm just saying that sounds like a very business minded product, and for a space that, I remember watching Shopify's charts, launch during pandemic and how perfectly timed that, e-commerce, sort of innovation was. I think these things are leaning into where the consumer businesses are. And I think that's a huge opportunity for people that are looking at it right.
And in anything to anything, what I think of when I hear that is, as a small business or as an individual person, is how do I land on monetization? In this plan, how can this plan that I'm creating for my business or myself or my creativity lead me to like the maximum amount of monetization by the end, which maybe it can help with too.
Yeah, I mean, minimally, there's a quality and scale of what they already do in promotion and marketing. But I think what I hear in your question is that is there something else even? Does this change the way you even think about the way your business even runs? But it's interesting. This is when we're just staring into either a confusing or happy fog of what does it all mean? But it's something for sure. Do we have time to talk about the Batman film?
It's all you. I didn't see it.
I'll just say, like, this landed in my feed today, literally as I was getting ready to jump on today. People should check out this. It's on Reddit. If you just type in 10-minute Gen AI Batman film, it's problematic as heck, probably, with its use of copywritten materials. But and all of those caveats, not just noted to say, and I'm like, that's real, and I don't know what can be done with this. But if somebody just put out a spec reel for what's possible with making films with AI, that this thing's bananas. I'm pretty sure it's either Kling or Hailuo. It is beautiful to look at, and it's highly effective as a film, but it's all kinds of wrong in terms of who owns the underlying rights. And I'm not being flip about that. It's just, here's a thing that's worth taking a look at.
Right. Very cool. Thank you for sharing. And if you check out your Spotify Wrapped and find out which artist your kids screwed up your algorithm with, let me know. And everyone can check out their Notebook LM generated podcast hosts that talk about your year in music. Thank you everybody for listening. I'm Jagger. This is Fred. And next week we will be back with Caleb Ward. Like, comment, subscribe on our videos, and sign up for our Curious Refuge newsletter. You will get AI film news directly to your inbox, and we will be back with a full web show for you next week.